The house was alive with the smells of rosemary and roasted lamb, the rich scent of butter and sugar rising from the oven, where Eleanor's masterpiece baked. She smoothed the tablecloth with deliberate care, aligning silverware with trembling hands. Tonight was Robert's 60th birthday, a milestone she had promised herself would be perfect, and yet perfection felt like a mask stretched too tightly across her face. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, each second a reminder that guests would soon arrive. Eleanor glanced at the frosted cake cooling on the counter. 3 tiers, golden candles waiting to be lit. It looked festive, celebratory. But when she caught her own reflection in the oven door, her smile faltered. Behind the makeup and pearls, her eyes betrayed something restless. For decades, she had played the part of devoted wife. Tonight, she wore it again, but her chest tightened as though the role no longer fit. Robert's laughter upstairs drifted down the hallway, a deep, practiced sound that once charmed her, now only sharpened her unease. When he appeared in the doorway, freshly shaven in his navy suit, Eleanor forced her lips into a curve. "Happy birthday, darling," she said, brushing flour from her apron. He kissed her cheek, his cologne overwhelming the scent of vanilla and spice. "You've outdone yourself as always," he said smoothly. The words were praise, yet his eyes lingered on the cake as though calculating something beyond flavor. Eleanor turned quickly, adjusting wine glasses to hide the sudden flush on her face. "Don't think about it tonight," she told herself. "Smile, endure. Just until the candles are blown out." The doorbell rang, startling her. Guests began to filter in, neighbors, old friends, filling the dining room with chatter and warmth. Eleanor greeted each with grace, but her attention flickered constantly to Robert. He stood at the center of it all, charming, commanding, the perfect host. Watching him, she felt a pang of something sharp and unspoken. As the last dish was placed on the table, Eleanor lit the candles atop the cake. Golden flames danced, illuminating Robert's face as everyone gathered around to sing. The melody was cheerful, the scene picture perfect, but Eleanor's gaze lingered on her husband, and in her eyes, there was no celebration, only the shadow of something waiting to be revealed. The song ended with applause, and Robert leaned forward to blow out the candles. A rush of cheers filled the room, followed by the clatter of forks against plates as slices of cake were passed around. Eleanor smiled graciously, thanking guests for their compliments, but her eyes never strayed far from her husband. Robert stood tall at the head of the table, raising his glass of wine. The crowd hushed in anticipation. He always did love the spotlight. 60 years, he began, his voice deep and confident. "I suppose that makes me old enough to be wise, but still young enough to enjoy the mistakes I'll keep making." Laughter erupted, easy and warm. Eleanor forced a small chuckle, but her heart remained unmoved. She studied the way Robert held the room, every guest drawn to him, every word calculated to charm. To outsiders, he was the ideal man, successful, confident, magnetic. But to Eleanor, his polished charisma felt like a polished mask. He continued, "I want to thank my beautiful wife, Eleanor, for standing beside me all these years. She is the reason I am who I am today." Applause followed again, and Robert lifted his glass toward her. His smile looked genuine, but Eleanor's stomach nodded. "Am I the reason? Or just the cover?" She clinked her glass lightly, offering a polite smile. But in her mind, fragments of memory surfaced. Robert's late-night phone calls when he thought she slept. The business trips that ended with shirts smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume. The evasive explanation she'd long ago taught herself to accept. As the toast continued, Eleanor's gaze caught the eye of Mrs. Porter, their elderly neighbor. The woman smiled kindly, but Eleanor thought she saw something, pity perhaps, or knowledge, linger in that look. It vanished quickly, replaced by casual chatter, but the moment lodged itself in Eleanor's chest like a thorn. Robert finished with a flourish. "To 60 years of life and to many more." Glasses lifted, voices echoed in agreement. Eleanor raised hers too, though her hand trembled slightly. As she drank, the sweet burn of wine did little to dull the sharper burn inside her, the gnawing suspicion that love had not been as faithful as she had believed. In the kitchen, voices murmured just out of earshot. Eleanor caught the faintest fragments of laughter in lowered tones. Something about Robert, something she wasn't meant to hear. The laughter in the dining room swelled again as dessert plates were scraped clean. Eleanor gathered the first stack of dishes, retreating to the kitchen with a hostess's smile still fixed to her lips. Once the door swung shut behind her, the expression melted away. Her shoulders sagged, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to breathe without pretense. She stood at the sink, rinsing crystal glasses when she heard it, a pair of voices drifting just beyond the doorway. She froze, water running over her hands. "Robert hasn't changed much, has he?" one woman whispered, her tone laced with amusement. A man chuckled low in reply. "Old habits die hard. Eleanor must be either a saint or completely in the dark." The words landed like a slap. Eleanor's grip faltered, and a glass slipped, clinking against the porcelain sink. She shut off the tap quickly, straining to hear more, but the voices lowered to murmurs and faded back into the hum of conversation. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Old habits. The phrase echoed in her mind, carrying with it the ghosts of unanswered questions. Robert's sudden business trips, the vague explanations about meetings running late, the times he had returned home with shirts rumpled, smelling faintly of perfume that was not her own. She closed her eyes, recalling the night she had waited up until dawn, only for Robert to arrive with a rehearsed story about a flat tire. His tone had been calm, convincing, and she, desperate to believe, had let it slide. She always let it slide. Eleanor's hands trembled as she dried the dishes, the towel twisting tighter and tighter in her grip. For years she had told herself suspicion was poison, that loyalty meant swallowing doubt whole. But tonight doubt refused to stay buried. The careless whispers in her kitchen had dug it back up, raw and stinging. She carried the next tray of plates into the dining room, her expression carefully arranged. Robert laughed loudly at some guest's joke, his hand resting casually on a wine bottle as if he had nothing in the world to hide. He looked the very picture of charm and confidence. Eleanor forced her lips into another smile, but inside her chest, anger curled like smoke. She had lived decades in the shadow of suspicion, never daring to name it. Now, someone else's careless words had given it shape. Later, when the last guest departed and the house fell quiet, she would walk past Robert's study and notice the drawer he always kept locked. And for the first time, she would feel an irresistible urge to know what secrets slept inside. The guests were gone. The house returned to silence. But Eleanor hardly slept that night. The whispers in the kitchen had replayed in her mind with cruel persistence. Old habits die hard. She lay awake beside Robert, staring at the ceiling while his steady breathing filled the room. By dawn, her suspicion had hardened into resolve. The following morning, once Robert left for his customary walk to the cafe, Eleanor moved quickly. Her pulse raced as she stepped into his study, a room she rarely entered. The curtains were drawn, dust collecting along the windowsill, the air faintly scented with leather and tobacco. Books lined the shelves in perfect order, but her eyes drifted immediately to the oak desk at the center. The top drawers yielded nothing unusual: pens, receipts, old notepads. But the bottom left drawer was different. It resisted when she pulled, locked tight. Eleanor's throat tightened. She remembered how Robert had once told her, with a dismissive smile, that some things in a marriage are better kept private. At the time, she had laughed it off. Now, the memory chilled her. She retrieved a thin hairpin from her vanity upstairs, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the lock. The soft click when it gave way felt like thunder in the stillness. Inside lay a small stack of letters bound with twine, and beneath them, a manila envelope. Eleanor sat in his chair, her breath shallow as she opened the envelope. Photographs slid out across the desk. They showed Robert with another woman, younger than Eleanor, smiling brightly at his side, her hand resting on his arm in a way that suggested intimacy. The background shifted from cafes to hotel rooms, each picture another nail in the coffin of Eleanor's loyalty. She unfolded one of the letters. The handwriting was feminine, playful, filled with affection. "Counting the days until you're mine again. You make me feel alive in ways no one else can." Eleanor's stomach twisted, bile rising in her throat. For years, she had convinced herself suspicion was weakness. Now, evidence lay before her, undeniable. By the time Robert returned that afternoon, Eleanor had restored the drawer, her face carefully composed. He greeted her warmly, chatting about the crisp weather outside. But when he kissed her cheek, She flinched before she could stop herself. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, a flicker of awareness passing through them. He didn't press her, not yet, but Eleanor felt it. The tension shifting, the air thickening. She had seen behind his mask, and he knew she had changed. Eleanor waited until evening to speak. All day she had moved about the house with quiet deliberation, the images from Robert's drawer replaying in her mind. Every time she glanced at him, laughing at the news or humming while polishing his watch, the photographs of him with that other woman pressed against her thoughts like thorns. After dinner, as Robert lingered over his glass of wine, Eleanor gathered her courage. Her voice was light, almost casual, though her hands gripped the edge of her chair. "Robert," she began, "do you ever think about mistakes we've made? Things we've hidden from each other?" He glanced at her over the rim of his glass, brows lifting in mock curiosity. "Mistakes? Eleanor, what kind of talk is that?" She hesitated, then pressed on. "I mean, all these years together, I sometimes wonder if we've truly been honest." Robert chuckled, setting his glass down. "My dear, if anyone has been honest, it's us. You've always been the worrier, haven't you? Overthinking things that don't matter." His smile was soft, practiced. Something inside Eleanor cracked. "And what about the woman?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. "The one in the photographs." Silence fell like a stone. Robert's expression barely shifted, only the faintest tightening at the corners of his mouth. Then smoothly he laughed. "Photographs? Eleanor, darling, what photographs?" Her cheeks flushed hot. "Don't play games with me." "I saw them." He leaned forward, his voice gentle, coaxing. "You've been under stress. Preparing for the party. Entertaining guests, it's no wonder your mind is inventing things. You've always had such a vivid imagination." The room tilted. His tone was so confident, so calm, that doubt seeped in despite herself. Had she imagined the letters? Had grief twisted her memory into something else? "You're not well," Robert added softly, reaching for her hand. "You've carried too much for too long. I worry about you, Eleanor. Truly. You need rest, not suspicion." Her hand recoiled instinctively. She searched his eyes, desperate for remorse, for acknowledgement, but found only control for a moment. She almost believed him. Almost. Then she remembered the handwriting in those letters, the joy in another woman's words. Anger flared quietly beneath her ribs. Robert rose, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Don't let shadows ruin us." He left the room as if nothing had passed between them. Eleanor sat frozen in the dim light, her mind torn between doubt and certainty. He wanted her to question herself, but beneath the fog of his lies, something had begun to awaken. The morning after Robert's subtle manipulations, Eleanor lingered at the kitchen window, staring out at the frost settling on the garden. His words from the night before still echoed. "You've always had such a vivid imagination." She pressed her palms against the counter, steadying herself against the creeping doubt. A knock startled her. When she opened the door, a familiar figure stood there. Detective Harris, retired now, but once their neighbor and a quiet fixture in their lives. His hair had turned silver, his frame heavier, but his eyes remained sharp. "Eleanor," he said warmly, handing her a small box wrapped in paper. "I heard it was Robert's big birthday week. Thought I'd stop by with a little something." She invited him in, offering tea, grateful for his presence. Robert was away at a meeting, leaving her free to breathe. Harris settled into the chair across from her, the air between them calm but watchful. They spoke first of harmless things, gardens, weather, the changing town, but Eleanor's composure cracked. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Harris, I think Robert is keeping something from me." The detective leaned forward, his expression tightening. "What makes you say that?" Her throat felt raw as she described the locked drawer, the photographs, the letters, and Robert's denial. She expected Harris to dismiss her concerns, to echo Robert's soothing lies. Instead, his jaw clenched. "You're not the first to question him," Harris said quietly. "When I was still on the force, there were whispers. Nothing we could ever prove. Business deals that didn't add up. Associates who seemed to vanish when things soured. And yes, talk of women. Always women." Eleanor's breath hitched. "So it wasn't just in my head?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but Robert is clever. He's built a life on charm, on being untouchable. People see what he wants them to see." Validation flooded Eleanor's chest, mixing with dread. For so long she had carried her doubts like shame. To hear them echoed by someone else, someone who had once investigated truth, was both liberating and terrifying. She clasped her hands together tightly. "I can't keep pretending, Harris. I need to know everything." His eyes softened. "Then you'll need proof stronger than whispers. Be careful, Eleanor. Men like Robert don't let secrets slip without consequence." Her heart pounded. She had the confirmation she craved, but it left her with a darker certainty. Robert's mask was about to crack. Eleanor waited 3 days before acting. 3 days of pretending Robert's kisses didn't curdle her stomach, of smiling faintly as he left the house for his so-called meetings. But Harris's words rang in her ears, steady and unrelenting. Men like Robert don't let secrets slip without consequence. On the 4th morning, Eleanor slipped on her coat and followed. She trailed him from a distance, careful to keep her pace steady. Robert walked briskly down the street, phone pressed to his ear, his laughter rehearsed and easy. He didn't notice her as he hailed a cab. Eleanor's pulse raced as she caught the next one, her voice tight as she told the driver to just follow. The ride stretched endlessly, the city blurring past. Finally, Robert's cab stopped outside a modest hotel on the edge of town. Eleanor leaned forward, breath shallow as he stepped out. A woman was already waiting. Younger, slim, hairstyled just so. The same woman from the photographs. She approached with a radiant smile, slipping her arm through Robert's as though she had every right to it. Eleanor's chest hollowed out. From the window of her cab, she watched them disappear into the lobby. Robert holding the door for her with the same chivalrous ease he had once reserved for his wife. She sat frozen, her nails biting into her palms. The photographs had not been lies nor her imagination. This was real, alive before her eyes. The man who had toasted her loyalty days earlier was now embracing another woman, as though 50 years of marriage were nothing but a discarded costume. Eleanor's driver asked softly if she wanted to go in. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, take me home." The ride back was a blur. She stared out the window, her reflection fractured in the glass. Every memory of her marriage replayed, poisoned. The anniversaries, the promises, the quiet evenings by the fire, they all felt like carefully scripted scenes in Robert's performance. She had believed in love. Now she saw it for what it was: control, manipulation, deceit. When she returned home, the house felt cavernous, empty despite its polished surfaces. She wandered from room to room, touching photographs, mementos, wedding china. None of it mattered anymore. The foundation of her life had rotted beneath her feet. In the quiet of her study, Eleanor sat down, her mind trembling on the edge of clarity. Justice, she realized, would not come from police reports or courtrooms. Robert's charm had shielded him too long. If truth was to be revealed, it would be by her hand. The days that followed blurred into a fevered haze. Eleanor moved through the house as though on autopilot, her every motion cloaked in calm routine, while inside her mind burned with a relentless fire. The betrayal had carved something open in her, hollowing out the love that had once sustained her, and filling the void with rage. At night she lay awake beside Robert, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest, imagining the same lips that now whispered promises to another woman. His warmth in the bed no longer comforted her. It suffocated. She would turn away, staring into the dark, hearing Harris's warning echo in her ears. Men like Robert don't let secrets slip without consequence. But Eleanor no longer wanted him to slip. She wanted him to fall. By day, she rehearsed her mask. She smiled politely at his jokes, nodded when he recounted meaningless stories, pretended not to notice when his phone buzzed and he silenced it quickly. Robert, smug in his control, seemed certain she had surrendered. He didn't see the storm gathering in her eyes. Eleanor began to plan in small, deliberate steps. She polished the silverware with unusual care. She set aside a bottle of wine, rich and red, saving it for a dinner, just the two of us. She checked the cabinets, the drawers, the hidden places where one might tuck away things not meant to be found. Her thoughts split into two voices, one still the devoted wife, begging her to forgive, to endure, to cling to the decades of love they had built. The other sharper, colder, demanding justice. He destroyed us. He stole the truth. He made you doubt your own mind. Do not let him win again. By the third night, the second voice drowned out the first. She stood at the mirror in her bedroom, staring at her reflection. For years, she had seen only a dutiful woman, a caretaker, a wife defined by endurance. Now she saw something else, someone forged by pain into steel. Her lips curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. The plan was simple, she told herself. He would sit across from her at their table. He would raise his glass as he always did. And there, at last, she would deliver the only gift he truly deserved. Robert believed his birthday had already been celebrated, but Eleanor knew the real finale was still to come. The evening unfolded with deliberate precision. Eleanor had spent the day preparing. The roast seasoned perfectly, the silver polished until it gleamed, the good china set with quiet elegance. Candles flickered at the center of the table, casting long shadows against the walls. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like a scene of devotion. A wife honoring her husband with a private, romantic dinner. Robert entered, loosening his tie, pausing at the sight. His brows lifted. "What's all this?" "A surprise," Eleanor replied softly. Her voice carried warmth, though beneath it her pulse raced. "Just you and me tonight. No friends, no neighbors. Only us." He smiled, pleased, and took his seat. "You've outdone yourself again, Ellie. I should have birthdays more often." They ate in near silence, the clink of cutlery the only sound between them. Eleanor watched him carefully, the way he savored the wine, the confidence in his posture. Every gesture reminded her of the photographs, the letters, the whispers. The rage beneath her calm grew sharper with each bite. When Robert lifted his glass to toast, Eleanor spoke before he could begin. "I know," his hand froze. "Know what?" Her gaze didn't waver. "About her. About the trips. About the lies you've fed me for years." A flicker crossed his face. Shock, then amusement. He chuckled lightly. "Eleanor, really? We've been over this. You let your imagination run wild again." She leaned forward, voice low and steady. "I followed you. I saw her. You don't get to twist this into shadows anymore." For the first time, his mask cracked. His smile faltered, replaced by a tightening of the jaw. Yet he recovered quickly, voice dripping with condescension. "So you spied on me? After everything I've given you? You should be ashamed." "I am ashamed," Eleanor whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Ashamed that I gave you my life, my loyalty, and you turned it into a joke." Robert's eyes hardened. "Careful, Eleanor. Marriages survive on forgiveness. You'll destroy everything if you keep clinging to suspicion." "No," she said firmly. "You destroyed everything the moment you touched her. The moment you chose deceit over truth." He sighed, setting his glass down with exaggerated patience. "You're tired. You've carried grief for too long. This is nothing but your fragile mind playing tricks." But Eleanor did not flinch. His words, once powerful enough to make her doubt herself, fell flat now. She had seen the truth with her own eyes. The photographs, the whispers, the hotel door swinging open. It was all carved into her memory like stone. The candles flickered, shadows dancing across her face. Her calm smile returned, though this time it was sharp, unyielding. "This is the Last Supper, Robert," she said quietly, "and it isn't about forgiveness." His glass hovered in his hand, confusion flashing in his eyes. Eleanor raised hers, the moment hanging heavy in the candlelight. Tomorrow, nothing would remain the same. The glass trembled in Robert's hand as Eleanor's words lingered across the table. The air between them was heavy, suffocating, the flicker of the candles casting his face into alternating halves. Light and shadow, devotion and deceit. He forced a laugh, brittle around the edges. "You're being dramatic, Ellie. What would we be without each other?" Eleanor tilted her head, her voice soft but resolute. "Something closer to the truth." Robert drank long and careless, as if defiance alone could drown her certainty. Eleanor's gaze fixed on the rim of his glass, on the liquid sliding past his lips. She had poured it with steady hands, though her heart had thundered against her ribs. In that moment she realized the strange duality of her being, both executioner and grieving wife. Minutes passed. Robert's words began to falter, his shoulders slumping as confusion clouded his features. He blinked at her, frowning. "What did you?" Eleanor did not move. She sat perfectly still as the color drained from his face, as his body sagged against the chair. His hand reached toward her, trembling, but she made no effort to take it. You lied to me, she whispered, voice breaking. For years, for decades, you made me doubt myself, made me question my worth, and still I stayed. Still I believed in us. Robert's mouth opened, forming words that never came. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, widened in fear before dulling with weakness. He slumped sideways, the glass slipping from his grip, shattering against the hardwood floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the soft hiss of candle flames remained, wavering as though they too were witnesses. Eleanor stared at him, her chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. Liberation surged in her veins, but so did devastation. She pressed her hands to her face, trembling. In killing Robert, she had not only ended the marriage, she had ended the illusion that had sustained her for 50 years. Slowly, she stood and approached him. His eyes, dim but still open, stared up at her. No words remained between them, only the echo of what had once been love, now hollowed and burned away. Eleanor knelt, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is not what I wanted," she confessed, voice shaking. "I wanted the man I thought you were, but he never existed, did he?" Robert's chest rose once more, then stilled. The final breath left him like a whisper, vanishing into the night. Eleanor sat back, the room spinning. She looked at the body of the man she had loved, the man she had despised, and felt both freed and shattered. The candles sputtered low, wax pooling like blood on the table. It was over, and yet, as Eleanor gazed at the lifeless form before her, she realized she was mourning not Robert's death, but the death of love itself.